If you told me around this time last year that I wouldn't just be playing but completing Final Fantasy VII Remake, I wouldn't have believed you, because that really just felt like a dream. Close to 4 years with little to no info, a lack of updates, and more? Yeah, no way I was. Thankfully, that dream is now a reality. Final Fantasy VII Remake is finally, after all this time, here, and I've played it extensively and beaten it. Today, I'd like to go ahead and discuss my thoughts on it mostly spoiler-free and express both my positives and negatives in multiple categories. Before we start though, a couple things. 1. This video will contain spoilers for the gameplay up until chapter 16, as I really believe that you should be able to experience those chapters on your own as they're extremely spoiler heavy even just showing them visually. So if you want to see some side quests, materia grinding, summons, weapons, and more, click off this video right now and go play FF7R. 2. I will not be showing anything that is present in chapters 16, 17, or 18. Those last 3 chapters are extremely heavy in the spoiler department, and I'd like to not show those to ruin your experience as there are many jaw-dropping moments. However, I'll do my best to avoid any major story spoilers from everything between chapters 1 through 15, though there is going to be some stuff gameplay-wise mostly. So, if you don't like that stuff, click off right now and go play. Alright, are you ready? After so long, I can finally say this. Let's take a look at Final Fantasy VII Remake. Let's mosey. Let's start off with a big question. Is Final Fantasy VII Remake good? I can confidently say a resounding yes. Final Fantasy VII Remake is easily one of my favorite games released this generation and is one of the best games Square has released in a very long time. It's not perfect, no, but I find it damn near it. But what do I love about it? Let me tell you. We're going to go by each category here that I've chosen and point out both my positives and my negatives with each one, and in the end, I'd like to give some hopes for additions maybe in the future updates and the like. Let's start off with the story. Of course, Final Fantasy VII Remake follows the story of Cloud Strife, an ex-soldier turned mercenary who teams up with a group known as Avalanche and his childhood friend Tifa to take down the evil Shinra Corporation, who's draining the planet dry by using up all of the planet's Mako energy. Of course, this being a part 1 only taking place in Midgar, the story was going to have to be expanded upon tremendously to make Midgar a full experience, with the original being roughly only 5 to 6 hours. The story does take quite a few liberties in that regard to change some things up, like new characters, new enemies, more of Sephiroth, and more, while, for the most part, keeping true to the story that the original Midgar set out to tell and then some. In almost every regard, this works extremely well. One of the best decisions I felt Square made with FF7R was making it a part 1 and setting it in Midgar. The story here is, for the most part, kept completely intact from the original, while introducing new stuff that, in my opinion, works extremely well. Aside from one thing, but we'll get to that later. The characters are easily the strongest aspect of it. Gone is Emo Cloud, Preachy Aerith, and Fishnet Barrett. The personalities from the original are kept intact, and it's so amazing. Cloud is exactly how I wanted him to be, trying to act cool and collected, but also breaking into his dorky nature at times. See the ball market. As it stands, Cloud is nailed here, but so are the others, even minor characters. But that's not all, because aside from the main cast, even some small characters from the original have been expanded upon. For example, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, the other members of Avalanche. I really love what they've done here to expand these guys from the original, without giving anything away. These 3 have given such a bigger impact than before, and I'm so happy they decided to go this route with them. It's combined with some amazing voice work, courtesy of the new voice cast. Yes, the voice cast was replaced with the new VAs for FF7R, however the old ones will continue to play these characters outside of FF7R, at least for the English dub. In my opinion, the new voice cast kills it in these roles. Even if I believe that some of the old compilation VAs are better, like Reno's for example, the new one does a damn good job. The 2 highlights are definitely John Eric Bentley as Barrett and Cody Christian as Cloud. These 2 are perfect in these roles. Even if some of the compilation VAs are better than the new ones, they all really still knock it out of the park nonetheless and do these characters justice. I couldn't be happier with this voice cast. Even with the new additions like Roach, the Watchman of Fate, and more of Sephiroth, I, for the most part, really enjoyed this. The characters are easily the strongest aspect of the story, from their interactions to each other, the banter in and out of battles, and even the sheer development they get, like Barrett for example, is amazing. Hell, even the Turks are expanded upon a tiny bit here, who had such a small role in the original FF7's Midgar. Even Shinra works here as expanded but genuinely great villains. Midgar here, from the NPC interactions to the expanded dialogue with characters big and small, to the sheer weight that this narrative sometimes carries makes the story here plain and simply amazing. I loved it. Up until the end, that is. This is going to get into some of the negatives here I have with the story without getting into any spoilers. So, here we go. The big negative, without showing any of it or giving specifics that I have with the story, is Chapter 18, the final chapter of the game. Now, I want to stress, I actually welcome change when it comes to a remake or a reboot of something, if those changes are warranted and work narratively. Hell, if I was against change, I wouldn't like the main story that was given here. But like I said, I like change when it works. For me, as beautiful as Chapter 18 looks, how fun it is to play, and how incredible the music is, I found the writing to really take a hit here. The chapter, after one fight in the beginning, changes the tone and the themes that the game sets out to do with Midgar in an, in my opinion, negative way. The game also changes stuff that, while it does leave me intrigued, also leaves me extremely concerned for the future. Without giving anything away, the ending is pretty much just Square saying, we can do whatever the hell we want now. And that kind of worries me. To me, that's the worst thing an ending could do. I'm still excited for the future of the remake project, absolutely. I love these characters, I love the world, and I want to see them again. But the worst thing an ending could do is make me also nervous and worried about the future. But with that said, I am still open to the changes they could possibly make down the road, as long as they're good changes to the narrative. But all in all, excluding Chapter 18, I actually loved this story. It works on a lot of levels with many characters both old and new, and I can't be happier for that. In my opinion, the FF7R team deciding to make Midgar its own separate game was an amazing move narratively. Even though I am a little bit nervous for the future, that last chapter does not do anything to harm my overall love of this story. Let's move on to the gameplay now, which is, in my opinion, the strongest aspect of FF7R by far. In the original, Midgar was a fairly small but really fun area to explore, but you could always see that there could be so much more to it, from the people, the things you could do, and then some. In my opinion, Square excels in this area of expanding Midgar as a world, and, in my opinion, makes this version of Midgar actually better than the original when it comes to raw gameplay. Don't get me wrong, Midgar is very linear. It's easily a very linear game, but linear is not bad at all. It's what's in these towns and areas that matters the most. Thankfully, they give you quite a bit to do as early as Chapter 3. Whether it's doing side quests to build up your reputation as a merc, finding material on the ground to build up your arsenal, finding music discs to use them at jukeboxes, or simply just hearing people around you talk about the certain sequences, there's a lot to do in these towns. After Final Fantasy 15 though, I was definitely concerned about the side quest aspect. 15 is a good game, but the side quests were easily one of the weakest parts of it. The side quests here in FF7R are fine. They're perfectly average, but they're fine quests. What I do like about them though is actually seeing some of them actually change the area around you. For example, doing a side quest with all the kids in Sector 5 slums and defeating a certain monster grants you the access to their hideout, where you can spend your Moogle medals at a fun little shop, or go for high scores in a brand new, albeit extremely bizarre looking minigame. You also can get different weapons from it too, like the iconic and hilarious Nailbat for Cloud. This did incentivize me to go out and do these quests, and I had a fun time doing so. But that's not all, because there's also the brand new character, Chadley, a young Shinra scientist who secretly wants to defect against them and asks Cloud and the gang to perform some tasks for him. In exchange, he can make brain and materia for the group, as well as eventually participate in summon battles with things like Fat Chocobo, Shiva, and more. The towns, thankfully, have you doing a good bit that kept me interested the whole way through, without a lot of the quests feeling extremely tedious, even if again they are fairly average. But of course, what you do in these towns is one thing. How's the combat? Of course, combat in an RPG is a very important factor to the enjoyment of the experience. In FF7R, the game is now a real-time ATB battle system. Does it succeed compared to the original's ATB turn-based battle system? The answer is, once again, a resounding yes. The combat is easily one of the strongest aspects of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Cloud, Tifa, Barret, and Aerith are your playable characters for this adventure, with Red 13 as a guest party member. Each character has his or her own strengths or weaknesses, but what I really loved about them was the amount of fun I had playing each different one, even if they didn't really fit my playstyle. Whether it was experimenting around with the returning materia system to see which I liked most on each character, or grinding a certain weapon out to get that ability without needing to have that weapon equipped, the combat is a blast in this, and the best part is, I'm not done exploring it yet. After beating it, I still need to go for certain weapon abilities on Tifa and Barret, grind out my magic materia to make it stronger, and upgrade my weapons to make them stronger than ever before. The sheer amount of depth and fun there is to the combat is actually amazing, and is easily one of my favorite aspects of the game. Building up the stagger gauge to knock down an enemy and deal extra damage, or even pulling off one of the returning limit breaks, was very satisfying. As someone who is fairly skeptical of the combat, I can safely say the devs have pulled it off. During battles, you'll gain SP points for defeating enemies. With those SP points, you can spend them in your weapon's core to upgrade them, their attack power, magic power, defense, or even give them new materia slots. I haven't finished this up yet for every weapon, and I already want to go back and do it so I can make these weapons as destructive as any other. Whether it's using limit breaks to mow down your enemies, using the new and returning abilities, or just simply mashing the square button to build up that stagger gauge, the combat is a blast to play. But don't be fooled, because the game is definitely not easy. I can safely say this game will kick you down if you're just button mashing your way through it. But that's not a bad thing. The game is very well balanced around that, and a lot of the time, it doesn't feel completely unfair when you lose a battle. You learn what you did wrong, and change what you did. I took this to heart, and I improved greatly because of it. But you also have to be mindful of things like your ATB gauges and not use them wildly. Do I want to use Die Quick here as Tifa to get raw damage, or maybe go and heal up a party member with something like Cure? The choice is yours, but you have to be mindful about it, and that's something that I loved. The balance here is, for the most part, great. I do hope the future parts though will expand on certain areas, however, like giving Cloud and Tifa more power in the air outside of magic attacks. But at the same time, that's what the team dynamic is for, and I liked it. Honestly, as someone who was very skeptical about the combat, I love it. I can't wait to experiment more and build my arsenal more in future playthroughs, because there's a lot of replay value here. I can go back and find the rest of the dresses, do more minigames, things like that. There's so much to incentivize me going back again, and I already want to. There's also the returning summons, which were pretty fun here in all honesty. While you can only use the big ones like Shiva, Ifrit, or Leviathan and bosses, when they're here, they're amazing visually, and they pack a huge punch. You can spend either your own or your party member's ATB bars on the summons abilities. When the bar is emptied, they use their big finishing move. Think of it sort of like how Kingdom Hearts handled summons. While it would have been nice to use these guys more, they're amazing for what you're going to be able to do. With that said, I do have a couple of small complaints about the gameplay, and they're in the combat. One thing is, I don't think bosses should be able to knock you out of your limit breaks. This happened a couple times, but there were times where I would get my limit as, say, Cloud or Tifa, and I would use it, but then the boss would just simply knock me out of it with a heavy hitting attack. Small thing, but I did find it kind of frustrating how I would spend the whole match building it up, only for a boss to get rid of it with one hit. Something that would have been nice to say if you get knocked out of it would be to have, say, half limit charge or something. That would have helped a little bit. Secondly, though this is admittedly small, I do wish that Cloud and Tifa had more efficient ways of taking down airborne enemies outside of magic. If their physical attacks had a part of their course to maybe expand their airborne attacks, I think that would have been kind of fun. But still, not a huge deal since that's what Baird and Aerith are for. There's also the music, and it's incredible. I can't say much else other than that I need this vinyl right now, at this very second. Please help, I think I'm addicted to the OST. Okay, jokes aside, the songs are incredible. They're updated in amazing ways. Even some songs are actually synthesized like the original FF7, which I thought was kind of a cool touch. My only complaint here was that I do wish Let the Battles Begin played a bit more often, but it's not the end of the world, and the new music is still great. I'd like to get into some general thoughts now though, starting with the visuals. Now when it comes to the character models and the actual visuals all in all, it's breathtaking. Chapter 2 and seeing Sector 1 just in destruction had my jaw on the floor the entire time, because it looked so damn gorgeous. The only complaint I can give towards the visuals is obvious if you looked at any of the reviews, the backgrounds and textures. Now sometimes the backgrounds look plain amazing, like when you look up and you see the plates. Those are amazing, but there are some times that the backgrounds, especially in the daytime, look really bad. For some reason, the backgrounds are a much more lower quality, and I don't know why, to be honest. It's to the point where it was actually extremely distracting, like in Chapter 16. Again, I'm not showing it here, but it did look really distracting. But hey, backgrounds aren't the end of the world as long as the world and the environments look great. Truth be told, a lot of the time, they do. However, then there is the texture issue. For some reason, this game has an extremely rough time rendering buildings, signs, or even the ground sometimes. I was hoping this was going to be fixed with a day 1 patch since it was a very common complaint amongst critics, but it sadly hasn't been fixed yet. Now, for one to know, Unreal Engine 4, the engine FF7R runs on, does have common issues with textures. Look at last year's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, for example. I don't think this is Square being lazy, I think it's just the limitations of UE4. I do hope though that they can fix this down the road, as it was distracting a lot of the time. Thankfully, I didn't run into any sort of bugs and glitches either, excluding the aforementioned graphical issues. The game ran at a solid 30 FPS throughout, and I don't believe it dropped very often at all. Though I do know there's one nasty soft lock in Chapter 17 in a sequence where you're climbing through a vent. So look out for that and save beforehand. Now, before we end off here, I'd like to move on to some things I'd like to see added down the road in future updates. Now, when you beat the game, you get access to not just a hard mode difficulty, but an option to go back into each chapter with your equipment and play them again, which is great for trophy hunting and such, and is sort of like a New Game Plus. This is great, and I love the addition, but I do think it'd be nice if we could have the option to select certain checkpoints. Chapter 9 is easily one of the longest and is home to quite a few trophies, so playing through the whole thing again could be extremely tiring. Secondly, a cutscene viewer. I'm actually shocked this wasn't included, but a cutscene viewer would actually be a pretty great inclusion for the future. But all in all, that's that. I actually can't believe that I've fully played and beaten the first part of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I remember when this got announced. I was still in high school, just about to become a sophomore. I was sitting in my bedroom and I saw the live stream on Sony's E3 stage, and I think we all knew what was going to happen there. 5 years later, here we are now. With that being said, I loved Final Fantasy VII Remake. Even with my ambivalence towards the new ending and final chapter and some of the visual issues, it didn't bog down my experience at all. I had an amazing time with FF7R, and it's easily one of my favorite games released this generation. This was an incredible time, and I implore you to check it out, whether you're an old FF7 fan or someone just wanting to get into the series through Remake. The wait is finally over, and it was a tearful, joyful, and incredible experience. I'm super happy with how this turned out, and I can't wait to return to the world of Gaia once again for part 2. Thank you, Square. Peace out, soldiers.